I'm Tony Lockwood, founder of Thompson Wright Partners, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the latest episode of Inside Track, where I discuss business transformation journeys with leading figures in industry. I'm delighted to welcome back Richard Lucas to the virtual sofa today. Richard joins me on the last episode of Inside Track for 2021. This podcast will focus upon hybrid working, and Richard will share his experience of working and delivering major transformation programs in the hybrid working world and the lessons that he's learned through this that we can apply as we move into 2022. Hi, Richard. Great to have you back. I think you're the first person to return for a second episode, so congratulations. We've had quite a lot of new subscribers since your sort of first episode. So can you just remind everybody a little bit about your background and your history and how you got into the world of change and transformation in the first place?
Sure, Tony. Well, thank you first of all for having me back. I think, as you say, the first one to come back and have this punishment second time around. I'm delighted to be here and talking about hybrid working, which is something that is very much on people's minds today and has been since the pandemic struck, I guess, back in March 2020 for us in the UK. Just a bit about me. So I've been working as a freelance consultant for the last 4 years, but for the last year, I've teamed up with a business partner and formed a company called Orgdesign Works. So we help organizations to design better, design themselves better to meet different strategies and different challenges that they have. So organization design is pretty much what I do, and that morphs into the sort of intendant and resultant change programs that come from that. So delivering programs of change. In the past, I've been a consultant with PwC. I was a director in the organisation and change practice and the energy and utilities leadership team for PwC in the UK, and I led the transformation and change team at SEA Partners prior to 2017 when I went freelance. So that's me. My background functionally is HR. I was an HR director in the car industry before I got into consulting. So that's
interesting. Me. And as you intimated there, we were keen to do another show with you to really talk about, as you say, something that's very topical at the moment, hybrid working, and specifically around hybrid working in and around change and transformation. So how can you continue to drive successful change and transformation within organisations in this sort of new hybrid world that we exist in at the moment? We'll probably talk about the fact, is it that new? It's just good to get a little bit of background on how you have adapted and how your views on hybrid working have developed over the last 12-18 months or so.
Sure. I suppose firstly, you're right insofar as it's not absolutely new. For those of us that inhabit the sort of world that we work in, hybrid working remotely, working from an office, have been something that we've been used to over our careers, although is still something that a relatively small percentage of the working population have the opportunity to do. Right. So I was looking at the ONS statistics just today about home working. The ONS surveys people every week, and it may surprise you to know that over the course of 2021, from January up until this point, the number of people who only travel to work, who don't work at home but only travel to work, increased from 40 to 55%. Those who do both has increased from 35 to 15%, and those who only work at home over the past year has remained the same, around 10 to 15%. If you do the maths on a working population of about 30 million people, we are talking about a relatively small percentage of people. However, it is the world that we inhabit. It's in the world of corporate functions, professional services, financial services, knowledge-based industries. So it's an important part of the workforce. That part of the workforce has had quite a bit of experience of working, sort of flexibly and remotely in the past. What I would say is that scale of it is so much different now. So, certainly it hit me like a steam train in March. It hit everybody else. There was one Friday to Monday in the middle of March where everything for me was face to face. I was running a program in London, a team of about six consultants working with 20 people from the client. We were working face to face workshops, high energy, high impact. And from one Friday to Monday, we tried to do all of that through screen as the office environment shut down. And that was incredibly difficult. We weren't prepared for it. The ways of working that we had as a project team, we tried to replicate remotely, and it was a big strain. Most people were working far harder, far longer, trying to get the same amount done that you can do face to face in a remote environment. And that was as difficult for us as it was, but that was even more difficult for our client, because they were looking at this continuity in the same breath as trying to deliver a change program. So, this was a major event that we had around that sort of Easter time.
Absolutely. So what key lessons did you learn during that period that you were, and how did you adapt the ways of working to ensure that that change program succeeded in the end?
I think for that change, that particular phase of that program, I think we failed to adapt. To be honest with you, we failed to learn how to replicate, or if you like, replicate, but how to work well in a remote environment. But we didn't use the right tools, number one. Subsequently, I've learned how to use online facilitation tools which work very well in a remote environment. But we didn't do that, and we ended up trying to be on screen the whole time, trying to replicate that constant face-to-face contact, and it was incredibly tiring. And my other clients at the time, or clients that I've worked with in the past in my network that I was talking to at the same time, also found that it was just the hardest time that they'd ever had in work. Working 12, 14-hour days, constantly on Zoom calls, constantly sat at their desk, not being able to move, and so on. I think what we've all learned is just how much more time it takes to get to the same outcome, or to a similar outcome, in a program of work like we do. You have to build in more time. You have to build in more time for people to work in a more asynchronous way. The way of everybody working on something at the same time. You have to divide the work up into and be very much more planful around how work is done. Be really clear about what can be done asynchronously, what needs to be done synchronously, what we need to all get together for, what we can do individually. And I think being more planful and building more time in, I think, are the two lessons that I've learned. That for me, kind of manifested in next two programs that I ran with clients, where that's where we started. We started with that from the outset, and in both of those programs, I didn't meet anybody. I've still yet to meet them. I'm still in contact with them, but still yet to meet anybody face to face. Those two programs, and again, they were about organization design behind different strategies. So looking at a high-level strategic organization design. That work took maybe twice as long as it would do if you had the flexibility of doing some of that work face to face. And I think that's the key thing, that when you have flexibility and choice, and the ability to say this work is better done face to face, this work is better done, or can be done just as easily remotely, then I think we're in the right zone.
Optimized. So you mentioned briefly there that you started to integrate some tools and utilize some of the online capabilities to help you engage better. What type of tools? Can you give us some examples?
So the first one would be, we were using most of the programs that I work with. We work with SharePoint, or we work with Microsoft Teams in terms of file management, or Google Docs, right? So the ability to collaborate around certain documents, that's always been there, right? And again, that didn't really change with the pandemic, it just changed in scale, right?
Yeah.
Other tools that kind of came to the fore, obviously Zoom was, is a key one, and obviously Microsoft Teams has carried on, but we all used all sorts of different video platforms. Miro is a tool that I've learned how to use over the last year, and I think it's very, very effective as a way of engaging people in a not quite in the same way as you can do face to face. It allows people to contribute. It allows people to think, and record their thoughts and connect their thoughts together in a working environment, which is very, 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 very helpful.
I've not used Miro, so can you just give us a very brief summary of its capabilities?
But I'm by no means an expert. If you think about it as something like, if you have like a big whiteboard or a big piece of brown paper on the wall, loads and loads of post-it notes, right? You can replicate that in a virtual environment, right? And you can connect thinking together. You can allow people to move stuff around. If your sessions are well designed, so they're designed to give people thinking space as well as talking space, then it can become a great tool, and it's something that continues after the event. So it exists in a workspace that people can continue to add to, contribute to. They can add documents to it. They can connect documents together. They can do all sorts of things in it, right?
One of the challenges I've found is, as you say, when you're driving change and transformation within organisations, that there is often a need to bring people into a space and workshop issues out. All too often, as you say, the natural inclination is to get people co-located to do that, and mapping out and using whiteboards and brown paper, etc., is tools that we've all used. So I'm just interested to see whether or not that tool give us that sort of same type of capability.
It does, except there are limitations as far as I'm concerned. So I would say that the workshops that I've designed through to now the third program that I'm doing in this sort of environment, have to break things up. If you're doing things remotely, doing things electronically, even using a tool like Miro, the ability to concentrate for more than 2 hours at a time is limited. So if you had a 6-hour workshop, and splitting it up over 3 days of 2 hours each is by far the better way of keeping everybody's attention, keeping everybody's energy level. Working through screens does sap your energy. It is difficult to sustain all the time. And compare that to a face-to-face workshop where I'm working with a client right now, and tomorrow I'm running a full day workshop, developing a customer value proposition with them, their customer value proposition. I know that at the end of the day we will achieve what we need to achieve. It will have been a fun time. People will have been engaged. It will have been something that they would have felt has been really, really valuable. To replicate that in a remote world, I have to split that up over 2 or 3 days, and I don't think it would have the same impact. When people are working together face to face, actually the productivity, I think the productivity, when the work that you're doing is facilitated by people working together, then doing it face to face is by far the best way. You don't have to be face to face to do much of the work that we do, right? So there is a balance there.
And it is. It's I wish I had £1 for every time I use this phrase recently, but it's one size doesn't fit all. I think what's been proven over the last 18 months, after that initial oh my God moment, what we're going to do now, is that we've all learned to adapt, and we've all learned to take on new technology, try different approaches. And some things, as you say, work, some things haven't worked, but you adapt your style. And I think moving forward, we're all in a much stronger place now than we were pre-COVID, because we can adapt. And, absolutely, we might say it's far better for us all to be in a room together. But sometimes, because of logistics and stuff, you can't get everybody in a room, or you can't get everybody in a room for the next 4 weeks because of other commitments. But you can, as you say, get people together, some co-located, but some in a Zoom room for 2 to 3 hour times. So you can actually start to move things forward quicker if you're not tied down to literally having to have everyone co-located at a time. By using these, as you say, using these tools or these approaches where we've become much more adept and much more comfortable with over the last 12, 18 months.
So I agree with that, Tony. Although for me, there's a note of caution. I think there's a note of caution in two ways. Firstly, most organizations now are thinking through how they develop a hybrid working policy or approach to it for those people in their organizations for whom that is suitable, right? And many organizations are adopting a policy based on time and place. So they're saying, in some cases, they're even asking questions, do you want to work from home or do you want to work in the office? Or do you think 2 or 3 days at home or the office is best? Asking people is a great thing, but asking the right question is even better. And I don't think it's a great question, right? Because what you end up is try and get a one size fits all, as you say, which for me doesn't work. So I do think there's a cautionary note here. The organizations that I think are doing this best are those that ask their team, figure it out based on the work they do and based on the people that are in those teams, right? Because certain work demands or certain work is done better in an office or in a face-to-face environment, and certain work can be done better or just as well in a home or a remote environment. So getting that right, the only people who know which is best are the people doing the work themselves. Right? So big organizations just come out with their policy on this, which is basically to leave for those people who are eligible, for those people who can work, leave it up to the teams to decide based on what they need to do for the customer, internal or external. And if they're in the office environment, the corporate environment, you can make those choices. There's a very enlightened way of going about this. And contrast this with, and I won't name organizations, but those organizations who say, right, you have to be in the office 4 days a fortnight, or everybody's got to come back to the office, or even we're shutting all of our offices and everybody's going to be remote. That might work for some people. It doesn't work for many. And the second element here is the people doing the work, because you can be doing the same job as somebody else in your team, but have very different personal circumstances. Different personal circumstances that mean you can't work from home effectively. You don't have the capacity to do that. You don't have the capability to do that, the resources to do that. And your motivations may well be different. We all have this image, right, of when we're on Zoom calls of having 1 or 2 people on the call who have lots of screens around them and a really great office environment at home. For many people, that's just not true. It's just not the case. And so office for them is a democratizing thing. It actually helps them to do their work better, and they get more out of it. So the work,
especially this time of year where it doesn't come light until 10 o'clock in the morning. It goes dark at 4 o'clock in the UK. Actually, that can be quite a depressing time for lots of people if you're in a 1-bedroom flat on your own.
Exactly.
And actually getting out, it's the social part that's just as important for many people of going to an office.
There is, exactly right, and I think it just adds weight to the phrase that you just used, which is there isn't a one size fits all. I do think organisations have to do this expressly and explicitly, and they have to give that level of autonomy to their team to make those decisions. That's where real engagement and real productivity will happen. Not just so that works for change programs just as much as it does for corporate work, sort of business as usual generally. The same is true. If you're running a change program, give that program the opportunity to figure out how it works best. Most change programs and those people that lead them have worked in a hybrid way for a long time. So we can adapt.
It's interesting though, Richard, because what you're talking about there, and there is a term for it, a Six Sigma term, and I can't remember exactly what the term is, but in factories, one of the core principles is allow the line to resolve the issues and give them the autonomy to resolve the issues. And what you're just describing there is exactly the same. Wherever you are in the business, focus on the outcomes, be clear about what the expected outcomes are, and then let the line decide the best course of action or the best solution or the best way of working.
Absolutely right. Because the sort of addendum to this is that worst of all worlds is where you have a policy where people have to spend a certain amount of time either at home or in the office, and the work they end up doing in the office, they end up on Zoom calls the whole day, right? Or not allowed to go into the office because they've exceeded their quota. Actually, there is a really important face-to-face meeting that has to happen. That's the best way of doing that. So, organizations need to be very careful that people don't end up doing the wrong kind of work in the wrong place.
And in your experience, oh, sorry, go on, Richard.
No, I was going to say that for me, almost an even more important cautionary note here is those people who are not able to work from home. How do we give them the same equity of flexibility and autonomy around the work that they do? As organization designers, we are designing for not just the 3 million people in the UK who can do this, but we're designing for the 27 million who are tied to a place of work, in healthcare or in schools or in retail or in manufacturing or in, whatever it might be, right? We're designing for those people. So how do we give those people, an equivalent voice in terms of how their work gets done, albeit that they are tied to a place of work? I think that's something that some organizations are now starting to wake up to. We're seeing a little bit more about that in the media, but I think it's a really important question. It's not just about, your office workers, your corporate staff, your professional staff, not just about that. It's about those people who really don't have a choice. How do we give them that level of autonomy and a greater feel that they have a choice about how they work?
Interesting. And I was going to say, in your discussions with clients around the future ways of working and the future of design, are you finding hesitancy? Are you finding uncertainty? What's the sort of general vibe out there? Are people welcoming the opportunity to change the ways of working, or are you finding that there is a real sort of resistance to it?
I don't think it's one or the other, Tony. I think it's very, it's an organization dependent question. So, there are organizations that are, to my mind, more enlightened and have more sort of naturally engage their people more in the kind of decisions that are taken around how they work, and those organizations I think are going to come out on top here. Those that dictate, thou shalt do this or thou shalt do that, I think we will see retention lowered in those organizations. I think people will want to work for employers who give them that sort of freedom and that sort of autonomy, much more so. So I think it is organization dependent. What I do see now in the practice that I'm in, which is designing organizations for the future, this is a question that is now part of the principles for which we are designing, right? So if you think about the design principles that you set up for an organization, now we are including questions around hybrid working and autonomy and choice and flexibility around how people work. So many practitioners like me are now bringing thinking into the work we're doing with our clients when we're designing new organizations. It's very important.
Yeah, and it's also on sort of much more sort of macro level. It's the knock-on effect that individual organizations' decisions are taking, how that will play out. because I was talking to someone the other day, and they were saying that they've been I've since the pandemic hit, I've still yet to go down to London. But I was talking to someone the other day that's going down quite frequently, and he was saying that actually it's as busy as it ever was. 6 months ago it was tumbleweed down the high street, but now it's as busy as it ever was. But so I wonder whether or not that sort of the change in the dynamic that we're all expecting to happen around city centre working is actually, it's past now, and we are all getting back into the city centre working, or whether or not that sort of hybrid, that flexibility, that people will be attracted to those organisations that are aligned to their ideal ways of working. That macro level, there's going to be some shakeout, I think, within city centre working over the next 12, 18 months, 2 years or so.
I think you're right. I think there will be an impact. I don't have a crystal ball on this, but I mean, as you said, I have been back into London. I've been, commuting around the country as well. And you're right. Activity levels are starting to get back to where they might have been before the pandemic. But the trains are not as busy, and city centres are not as busy just yet. Even though I said earlier, right at the start of this, over 2/3 of the working population are travelling to their place of work. I think we'll see. Do you think the return to the office, the slow return to the office that we've seen over the last 12 months, will slow down any major impact? I mean, there were some risks, weren't there? Actually, city centres would be hollowed out, restaurants would close, etc. And that sort of whole economy that sat around being based in an office was under threat, and a lot of people felt that was under threat. I certainly feel that that's not as intense as it was. I do think there will be changes. I hope there will, because I hope what this has done is it's said to organisations, we have, in order to retain people, we have to give them a sense of more autonomy, more flexibility, and more choice of how and where they work, where they have that choice. And for the rest of the organisation, we have to figure out how we do that for them as well, whilst they are still tied to the workplace. I think we will see that debate continue over the next years.
Thank you very much, Richard. That was a perfect summary. And thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me. Great.
Thank you, Richard. That was a great session. As we move into 2022, I believe the hybrid working model will become ever more prevalent for both operational and transformational roles. So it was a great opportunity for us to review your thoughts and thinking and lessons that you've learned over the last 12 months. Thank you very much for your time. As I said earlier, this is the last episode for 2021. After a short break for Christmas and New Year, we will be back in 2022, where we will again share the experience of other leaders within change and transformation. If you believe that 2022 is the year for you to pivot into the world of consulting, we've developed a program that is especially tailored for those making that transition from project to project lifestyle into one of building and scaling a consulting business. If you're interested in learning more and understanding the core elements of the program, try out our scorecard. The link is in the show notes, but it's a great way for you to identify the areas where you are particularly strong and would benefit from the consulting lifestyle, whilst also highlighting those areas where maybe more development is required. Scorecard is completely free, no obligation, so please do try it out. And for those that haven't already joined the Transformation Leaders Hub, check that out over Christmas as well. With that, have a great Christmas and enjoy the festivities, whatever you're doing. And I look forward to seeing you again in 2022. Thank you very much. The Transformation Leaders Hub is going from strength to strength. So if you haven't already, go and check it out. www.thetransformationleadershub.com. With that, once again, Jane, thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.